So chapter 4, communication and documentation. All right, what we'll be looking at. We'll be looking at therapeutic communication, the principles of communicating with patients in a manner that achieves a positive relationship, adjusting communication strategies for age, stage of development, patients with special needs and differing cultures, interviewing techniques, verbal diffusing strategies, family presence issues, dealing with difficult patients. All of that we'll be looking at. We'll be looking at EMS system communication, communication needed to call for resources, transfer care of the patient, interact within the team structure, EMS communication system, communication with other healthcare professionals, team communication, and dynamics. Now, of course, we'll be looking at documentation, proper recording of the patient findings, principles of medical documentation, and report writing. So this chapter is not new. This is something you would have covered in your EMT training, and this is something you would have developed in your EMT practice, but we're still going over it. So introduction. Communication is the transmission of information to another person. It can be verbal or it can be non-verbal through body language. Effective communication is an essential component of pre-hospital care. So it's very important that we know how to communicate with our team members, how to communicate with other healthcare professionals, how to communicate with the patient, how to pull information from the patient. So verbal communication skills are important for AEMTs. They enable you to gather information from the patient and bystanders. It allows the AEMT to coordinate with other responders and to transfer patient care. Documentation, very important. If it wasn't written, it wasn't done. So, or actions or interventions, any procedures that we carry out need to be properly documented, and there are specific formats for that. So documentation, written or electronic record of AEMT's care that becomes a part of the patient's permanent medical record. It demonstrates appropriate care was delivered. It helps others who may participate in the patient's future care. Complete patient records. Guarantee proper transfer of responsibility. Comply with requirements of health departments and law enforcement agencies. Fulfill your organization's administrative needs. So again, proper documentation is essential to proper transfer of care, relaying information to health departments and law enforcement agencies, or assisting law enforcement agencies, and of course the administrative needs of your organization are also based on proper patient care and documentation. So proper records keeping is essential. Radio and telephone communications. This link you to other EMS members, the fire department, the law enforcement. You must know what your system can and cannot do, and how to use the system efficiently and effectively. Therapeutic communication. Therapeutic communication uses verbal and nonverbal communication techniques and strategies to encourage patients to express how they feel and achieve a positive relationship with the patient. And there are factors that should be considered when communicating with a patient. So you need to consider how old that patient is. Think about your body language, your body demeanor, your clothing, culture, educational background, the type of environment, whether it's appropriate to maintain eye contact, facial expression, gender, posture, voice tempo, volume. Now, Shannon Weaver communication model, very popular communication model. It focuses on a sender, right? And the sender takes a thought and encodes it or change and forms it into a message. That message is then sent to the receiver. The receiver breaks down the message or decodes the message and then send a response back to the sender. Now, age, culture, and personal experiences shape how a person communicates. Tone, pace, and volume of language reflect mood of person. So the tone, the pace of communication, and how loud you're speaking can affect how your message is perceived. Body language and eye contact are greatly affected by culture. Ethnocentrism, considering your own cultural values more important than those of others. You need to be careful of that. Cultural imposition, forcing your values onto others. You also need to be careful of that, right? So we have to respect other person's culture. We have to respect other person's values and views, and we can't allow that to interfere with how we administer care because we disagree with their values or cultures. Nonverbal communication, body language, provides more information than words alone. Facial expressions, body language, and eye contact are physical cues. So you can ascertain a person's intent or mood based on their well, I don't want to say ascertain, you can perceive a person's intent or mood based on their body language and facial expression. And your body language and facial expression can be perceived negatively. So we have to be mindful of that. Physical factors that can affect communication. Noise, anything that dampens or obscures true meaning of message, literal noise or other factors. Proxemics, study of space and how distance between people will affect communication. As a person gets closer, greater trust must be established. Verbal communication. Asking questions is one of the most fundamental functions of the AEMT. So we must be able to draw out information from the patient. And in order to draw out valuable information, we need to ask the right questions and we need to ask the questions appropriately. So Questions can be open-ended, which requires some level of detail in the response. Use whenever possible. Questions can also be close-ended, can be answered in a very short response. Use if patient cannot provide long answers. And table 4-3 goes into more detail about open-ended questions and close-ended questions. Other communication tools that you can utilize to get information, or you can use facilitation techniques, silence, reflection, empathy, confrontation, interpretation, explanation, summary. You can read up more on these tools when you're studying, right? So in your downtime or study time, you can go into more details with these tools. Interviewing techniques. When interviewing a patient, consider using touch to show caring and compassion. Use consciously and sparingly. Avoid touching the torso, chest, and face. Interview techniques to avoid: providing false assurance. So don't give your patient false assurance. Giving unsolicited advice. So if you're not authorized to give certain information, don't do it. Asking leading questions, interrupting the patient. Be very careful of the interruption. Try not to interrupt your patient. Listen to your patient. Patient can tell you a lot about what's happening. Using why questions. Be careful of the why questions. That can be perceived as confrontational. Speaking in a professional jargon. Be careful of that. There are some patients that you have to get down to their level of communication for them to understand what it is that you're asking and to get the information that you need from the patient. So you may have to go down to their level of communication. Keep it simple. Family, friends, and bystanders may be valuable during interview. Allow patient to answer your questions if he or she is able and wants to. Do not be afraid to ask others to step aside. You may need to decide if having family and friends nearby will make patient more or less anxious. Now, golden rules that we need to stick to. To help calm and reassure a patient, make and keep eye contact at all times if it's appropriate. Establish rapport. Tell the patient the truth. Be aware of your body language. Speak slowly, clearly, and distinctly. Act and speak in a calm, confident manner. Communicating with difficult patients. Diffuse situations by staying calm. Talk openly and honestly. Always consider scene safety. Call for backup when necessary. Never threaten a patient. Never threaten a patient. Communicating with older patients. Do not assume an older adult is senile or confused. So don't assume that them can't understand what you're saying to them, right? Don't make that assumption. Don't make that assumption. Be vigilant for objective changes when possible. Give patients time to pack personal items, hearing aids, glasses, etc. Table 4-6 has interviewing techniques for older patients. You can go through that in your study time. Communicating with children. Children will likely be frightened, may be afraid of strangers, may panic if separated from parents. Use friendly eye contact, smiles, and calm, subdued explanations. Place yourself at the child's eye level. So with children based on their developmental age, you may have to involve the parents or caregivers. Involve a parent in the child's care. Demonstrate on a sibling or parent if possible. Use a toy. Be honest. Tell the child ahead of time if something will hurt. Respect the child's modesty. Tell the child what you are doing and why it needs to be done. Communicating with hearing impaired patients. They have normal intelligence and are usually not embarrassed by their disability. Let the patient see your lips. For the ones that have hearing aids, be careful. They are not lost. They may be forgotten if the patient is confused. Ask family about the use of a hearing aid. Steps to take to communicate effectively with patients that are hearing impaired. Have paper and pen available. They may be able to write information. If patient can read lips, face patient and speak slowly and distinctly. Never shout, so don't raise your voice at them. Listen carefully, ask short questions, and give short answers. And there are some sign language that you can learn. Some important signs: sick, hurt, help. Ask the patient if he or she has any vision. So let's look at the visually impaired patient now. Ask the patient if he or she has any vision. Visually impaired patients are not necessarily completely blind. Expect your patient to have normal intelligence. Explain everything that you are doing as you are doing it. If you're moving stuff around in their environment, you need to put it back because their environment is set up a particular way where they can navigate based on where things are. So stay in physical contact with the patient as you begin your care. If the patient can walk to the ambulance, place his or her hand on your arm. Transport mobility aids such as cane with patient to hospital. Some of these patients may have a guide dog, easily identified by special harness. If possible, transport dog with patient, otherwise arrange for care of the dog. Communicating with non-English speaking patients. You must obtain a medical history. Find out if the patient speaks some English. Use short, simple questions. Point to parts of the body. Have a family member or friend interpret. Consider learning some common phrases in another language used in your area. Communicating with special needs patients. Don't overlook needs of people with speech or communication disorders. Touch and eye contact are helpful bridging mechanisms. Family members or caregivers can facilitate your efforts. Communicating with other healthcare professionals. Your reporting responsibilities do not end when you arrive at the hospital. You're required to give an oral report to the hospital staff member who has at least your level of training. So if you worked in the field and you ever had to hand over a patient, then you should be very familiar with what this slide is saying. So you have to relay information to the healthcare provider that you're handing over. and that information is going to be based on the subjective and objective information and what you did and how you transported the patient. So that information should include what the patient tell you, what the patient complained of, what you observed based on your assessment, what you did based on your assessment findings, and method of transportation, or how, if not method of transportation, how the patient responded to your treatment, or how is the patient responding to your treatment. Oral report components should include the name, the patient chief complaint, illness or injury, detailed information, any important history, pertinent findings of the physical exam, patient's response to treatment, vital signs. Communication systems and equipment. Most EMS communication systems today are based on radios and should be backup systems and should have backup systems in place. You must know when to use your communication equipment and what to say when you are transmitting. All radio operations in the US are regulated by the FCC. Radio communications. A two-way radio consists of two units, a transmitter and a receiver. Channel assigned frequency or frequencies used to carry voice/data communication. Frequency is the number of cycles or oscillations per second of a radio signal. Base stations. A base station radios, this is any radio hardware containing transmitter and a receiver that is in a fixed location. Base station locations may include dispatch centers, fire stations, ambulance bases, or hospitals. More power and higher, more efficient antenna systems than mobile or portable radios. Right? Makes sense. Mobile and portable radios. Mobile radios mounted inside a vehicle used to communicate with the dispatcher, other public safety agencies, and medical control. Operate at a lower power output than the base station and is assigned a specific frequency. Frequency bands, portions of the frequency spectrum assigned for specific uses, most common for medical communication. And the VHF band, which is 30 to 300, common for medical, and ultra high frequency, 300 to 3000 megahertz. Portable radios, handheld two-way radios with limited range, used by providers when away from the unit or ambulance. A radio system can be simplex, duplex, or multiplex. A simplex system means you have to push to speak and then release to listen. A duplex has simultaneous function, so you can talk and receive information. You can talk and listen simultaneously. Multiplex combines an analog or digital signals, so it can transmit two or more types of information, either by voice or telemetry. Repeater-based systems. Special base station radio receive messages / signals on one frequency and then retransmit that information on a second frequency. The repeater-based system boosts the signal of the transmission. Digital radio and trunk system. Digital radio systems allow transmission of digital signals, computer or analog voice, clearer, and allow the transmission of greater volume of data in the same bandwidth. Can communicate with digital and analog radios. With digital trunk radios, many frequencies are assigned to a group. So you can use multiple frequencies. Concerns related to radio communication. Signals from base and repeater station radios are generally heard and understood from a greater distance than signal from mobile unit. You may be able to hear dispatcher, but not be heard when you transmit. Success of communications depends on efficiency of your equipment. Maintenance of radio equipment that is operating properly should be serviced at least once a year. Any equipment not working properly should be removed from service and sent for repair. So we can't use defective equipment. Outdated equipment should be removed from service. Do not subject equipment to dusty, damp, or wet environments. These can interfere with the function of the equipment. Cell satellite telephones. AEMTs often communicate with receiving facilities by cellular telephone. That's the method that is commonly used in Jamaica. Simply a low power portable radio. Can also use satellite phones, sat phones. Use a satellite instead of cellular system. Valuable in rural or remote areas and disaster situations. Digital equipment. Telemetry. This is the capability of measuring vital life signs and transmitting data to a distant terminal. ECGs, other measurements. And most services have a system where the cardiac monitor is can be linked to receiving facilities. And as the information is captured, it's sent to the receiving facility. New technology allows digital telemetry data from cardiac monitors to be transmitted via Bluetooth to a monitoring center. Other communication equipments. Interoperability allows all agencies involved to share information with each other in real time, connect landlines, cell phones, and computers. SafeCom communication program developed by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, set of national interoperability standards to develop compatibility across the communication system. So SafeCom, which is developed by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, is the regulating body to ensure that there is a standardized system of communication across a specific area within the U.S. Association of Public Safety Communication Officials International has established digital radio hardware standards. So again, these systems are governed by different standards or specific standards. And when I said different standards, I mean you have different agencies. Project 25 P25 standards ensure digital radio equipment manufacturers develop systems that are compatible with each other and older systems in use. Computer-aided dispatch, CAD, computerized method of call handling. Basically, it's a system where the information for the patient is sent to the unit. So you can get all of the information in terms of what the caller said, the location, and all of that is sent to a system in the unit. So the computer collects caller information and makes recommendation for which EMS unit is closest. So the closest unit will get the information. Data for dispatch can be sent directly to the EMS unit by data transfer. Can recommend emergency actions to dispatcher for relay to patient or bystanders. Mobile data terminals, MDTs. Computer terminal inside ambulance that directly receives data from dispatch center, displays address and directions, allows for communication without the use of the radio. Backup communication strategies. The goal of a backup plan is to ensure you can maintain contact when the usual procedures do not work. Simplest backup plan relies on written standing orders. Landline backup to link fixed components such as hospitals and public safety services. Other options include cell phones, older low band and high band systems. Notification. Someone tells EMS an emergency exists. The dispatcher. So the dispatcher determines the relative importance of the 911 call. And based on the information they receive, they will assign the most appropriate response for that emergency. They provide key information to the responding units. Dispatch communicates from service headquarters with responding EMS team. Appropriate crew is contacted and informed about the call. Inform the dispatcher when you arrive on the scene. En route to communications. En route communications, sorry. Once ambulance is underway, the dispatcher may ask the caller for additional information. Once this is received, it is relayed to the responding unit. The dispatcher may give pre-arrival instructions to the caller for basic medical procedures before your arrival, which is very important to the chain of survival. Communication during transport. Communicate with receiving hospital, let them know what to expect. Reassess the patient conditions and vital signs. Report significant changes. And ideally, you want 3 sets of vital signs. And when you're relaying information to the receiving hospital en route, it needs to include the patient chief complaint, the patient history, your assessment findings and management, your method of transportation, whether it's emergency transport or routine. Some services transmit PCR data to emergency department. Communicating with medical control and hospitals. Consulting with medical control notifies hospital of incoming patient, provides opportunity to request advice or orders, advises hospital of special situations. Plan and organize radio communication before you transmit. So before you go on the radio and relay that info, think about what it is that you want to transmit and have a format that you work with. Deliver patient report in an objective, accurate, and professional manner. Follow standard format established by local EMS system. People with scanners may be listening. Depending on how protocols are written, you may need to call medical control for permission before you can administer a specific medication that is required. You may have to contact your medical director to determine a transport destination of patient. You may have to contact your medical control or director to stop treatment and or decide not to transport a patient. Medical control physicians base their instructions on information from the AEMTs. So it is essential that you give them the right information, and your assessment needs to be thorough in order for you to have adequate information to relay. Never use codes unless directed by protocol. Once you receive an order, repeat it back. So if your medical director or your medical control gives you an order, confirm that order, right? Repeat it back. Do not blindly follow an order that does not make sense. You are in contact with the patient. So if your medical control gives an order that you think might not be appropriate, don't just blindly follow it if you know that it could be harmful to the patient. Special situation. Advise hospital of special situations such as hazmat situations, rescues in progress, multiple casualty incidents. The earlier, the better. Provide an estimate of people involved. Identify the patient's special needs. Effective radio communications. Use your system effectively. Standard radio operating procedures. Reduce misunderstandings. Keep transmission brief. Develop effective radio discipline. So that's the standard. Reduce if it's standardized, there will be less misunderstanding. Try to keep the information that you're relaying brief and practice appropriate radio discipline. Follow your guidelines, follow your standing orders, follow your protocols. Written communication and documentation. Patient care report. This is a legal document. It is a weak area in EMS response in Jamaica. The written reports are not being done well, and some are not being done any at all. And that can be attributed to a lack of regulation and oversight. But this is an area in Jamaica that needs to be strengthened, right? The reporting skills, the written reports need to step up. So the PCR is a legal document. It records all care from dispatch to hospital arrival. There are two types, written and electronic PCRs. Written is more common in Jamaica. Electronic PCR will be more common outside of Jamaica. Use 24-hour military time. So that's what's used on PCR reports, military time. Learning to write effectively and accurately is an important AEMT skill. And in order to be able to develop this type of skill, it's important to read a lot. You need to read, recognize what your weaknesses are, and find source material to improve those weaknesses. Be mindful of your spelling, be mindful of your grammar. Use a standardized format when doing your report. Every report needs to be complete, accurate, and legible. If it wasn't written, it wasn't done. So if you didn't do something, don't write it in your report, and don't write something in your report that you didn't do. Now, legal issues. of a PCR. No bias or personal opinion should be in your report. So do not put your personal opinion or your feelings in the report. It's a legal document. You need to only put the facts. The facts and the facts is, what did the patient complain of? What is the history of your patient? What were your findings on assessment? And based on your findings, what did you do in terms of treatment? How did the patient respond to your treatment? What was your method of transportation? Only put facts, don't put assumptions. So don't put information that will be perceived as assumption. Your report should be complete or well written, legible, and professional. Use proper spelling. Use proper spelling. And if you're not comfortable with a particular word in terms of its spelling, find a simpler one to use or Google it quick. Proper grammar, very important. The only way to develop proper grammar, as I said, you need to read a lot. You need to read a lot. And if you think you have a particular weakness, look for resources that will fix that weakness, right? So I am not a good speller, and my grammar is sometimes off. And the way I work on that is by reading. The more I read, the more I learn, the more I see how words are spelled and how grammar works in certain situations, right? And there are many resources available through social media, good resources that can develop these skills. Use accurate terminology. So use accurate terminologies, right, in your report. Components of a PCR. PCR serves 6 functions. Can be used for continuity of care. It is a legal document. Can be used for educational purposes. So let's say you're getting only a certain types of medical emergencies. It can be used to improve skills for that specific emergency, or it can be used to say, okay, these are the common emergencies, let's work on the uncommon one. So it can be used as an educational tool. It is a source of administrative information. It is used for research. It is used to evaluate and continually improve the system. Document any changes in the patient's condition. Patient information collected on a PCR should include the patient chief complaint. So what did the patient complain of? Their level of consciousness or mental status. Vital signs, assessment findings, patient demographics, age, sex, ethnic background should be on your PCR. In the narrative section of the PCR, it should have the time of events, your assessment findings, the type of care rendered, any changes noted based on treatment, refusal of care, staff person who continued care, significant negative findings, and important observations about the scene. Reporting errors. If you leave something out or record it incorrectly, do not try to cover it up. Again, if you didn't do it, don't write that it was done, right? And do not leave out important information. So make sure your report is thoroughly complete. It's complete. So don't submit an incomplete report and don't put things in your report that you didn't do. If you didn't do it, just say you didn't do it. You didn't get a blood pressure, you were unable to get a blood pressure because. Don't make up a blood pressure and put in your report. Falsification causes poor patient care. That's very dangerous for the patient. Possible suspension and or legal action. We don't want to be in that category. Minimum requirements. Ensure all procedures performed are documented, insurance codes obtained, and appropriate medical necessity signature obtained. PCR should indicate why a patient may have needed emergency care. Refusal of care, a common source of lawsuits. Thorough documentation is crucial. Document any assessment findings and emergency medical care given. Have patients sign a refusal form, have a witness sign as well, complete the PCR. Special reporting situations. Depending on local requirement, these include gunshot wounds, dog bites, some infectious diseases, suspected physical or sexual abuse, the use of mutual aid services, mass casualty incident. Submitting the report. PCR and all information are considered confidential documents. You may not have the time to complete a full PCR while at the hospital. Most systems will have a drop report or transfer report. And that brings us to the end of this chapter.